thefourthperiod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 78. Hockey's back. I'm your host, Isaiah.
And I'm Chef B.
Yeah. And Dan the Flyer Fan is not here tonight. You can follow him on Twitter at Dan the Flyer Fan. And, of course, at Brotherly Puck and at Brotherly Pod. It's just us tonight, and we're going to be with Dennis Bernstein from thefourthperiod.com. So don't worry, we got a lot of information for you. And listen, Chef, hockey's back, and there's a lot of news to talk about. And it's not just the trivial stuff that we've been kind of, punting around with for the last couple months.
Yeah, it's very concrete. It seems like they got most of it figured out, and we're going to roll ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's hit you with some critical dates as they were released by the NHL. Some of you have probably already heard them, but for those who haven't, and you count on the podcast to deliver the information. We all know that the training camp started yesterday, Monday, as we record this, and that on the 26th, the teams are going to travel to a hub city. We know that the hub cities are Edmonton and Toronto. The Western teams will be in Edmonton, and the Eastern teams will be in Toronto. Between July 28th and the 30th, there are going to be some exhibition games. I got to ask DB about that. Chef, do you know if the preliminary round teams play the exhibition games as well, or is it just the teams in the round robin?
I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything on that, but I guess DB will probably know.
Yeah, DB will fill us in. That's why it's so great to have him on. Okay, so August 1st, the Stanley Cup qualifiers begin, and they're going to, right before the first round begins, on August 10th, they're going to have phase 2 of the draft lottery, and that's the to be determined for Alex Lafreniere. One of those teams that loses in the round will be the ones that actually is eligible, and each of those teams will have an equal chance. I think it's 12.5%. I think that's something we messed up, and one of our followers, Dallas Wagner, hat tip to him for pointing that out to us. We just kind of said that the team that wins the Stanley Cup can't get that, but it's the only teams that are eligible for that are the ones that lose in the first round, which would seem right. And then, so August 11th, the first round begins, and this is when the Flyers are playing after the seeding, the first 3 games that they play, and we've covered that the last couple shows. And they hope, now some of these are tentative based on how long these series go, but around August 25th, the second round begins. September the 8th, the conference finals. September 22nd, Stanley Cup final begins. October 4th is the last possible day of the final. October 9th and 10th. Okay, we're not even waiting a week. You have the 2020 NHL draft, and the goal after that point, and I guess you're going to have the free agency like right after that. The goal is to start next season, December 1st.
Yep.
And
we talked about that because they don't want to get pushed back any more than they are. It's going to take 2 years to kind of shave off a month here and a month there and all that with the new deal. They want to make sure that they have a complete season and get some of that revenue back, and that's part of the deal that we'll probably talk to DB about.
Yeah, and who knows? There could be some aspect of this that is the new normal, if I could say. But we'll have to see how that works out. They may not want to compete with right in the heart of football season the way the NBA does, and maybe they want to get a little bit of the way from the NBA. But we'll have to see. I think there's an opportunity, like we mentioned before, for the NHL to do this better than any other league and get some of that rating share back that they lost with the lockouts. But one other thing I just want to cover in terms of information. So the Flyers have a schedule here in Toronto. They're going to play the Bruins August 2nd. Then their next game is August 6th against the Capitals, and then the final round-robin seeding game will be August 9th versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. And after that, if the qualifying rounds are over and they're seated where they're at and they play one of those teams, and we're off to the races.
It's gonna be very entertaining. I think like I said, I think I might have touched on this last week. Uh, NHL has a very unique opportunity here. They're going to be, quite frankly, the only game in town for a while, and they have a chance to capture part of a new audience. I mean, if you think about it, people are going to tune into something because they haven't seen live sports other than golf, really, and it's some of the basketball players, football players that are doing the celebrity thing.
MMA, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah, and so now this is a chance now for them to get in there and win over some people. I mean, what better time to watch the hockey really when it turns to the playoffs? I have some friends that don't pay attention until like late February, early March anyway. And they're those people that casually look at the hockey things, they'll watch the games against the Penguins or something along those lines, like rivalry games, but they really don't pay attention until it's playoff time, and that's when. So now they got a chance to grab these people who probably never seen a game before and maybe never even seen a playoff game. I mean, that's huge. And then you get this extra round robin, this extra qualifying round. This cup is going to mean more. Everybody's talking about how it has to have an asterisk next to it, but this thing's going to mean more to these players because it was more. You fought harder for this win. I think it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, well, they didn't have an asterisk in 1995 when they played 48 games, so I don't know. Give me a break, But yeah, that's how I feel. And somebody said, well, they played straight through. Yeah, but still, 48 games. You're just you're just starting your best hockey after that little warm up. When you look at it, like slightly more than half a season, but whatevs with that. But I hear you, and I agree. I mean, they have an opportunity. Let's cash in. And speaking of cashing in, Chef, one Mark Friedman has signed a deal, an extension with the Flyers for 2 years, $725,000 per, and it's a one-way deal. And you know what that tells you? He is going to be in the mix next year, probably as a seventh defenseman. And the first thing that comes to mind is, hey, great for Mark Friedman in a limited sample. He looked competent, which is what you want out of a seventh defenseman. He's still improving. I believe that defensemen get into their mid to late 20s before they hit their peak. And also what that portends for guys like Justin Barron and Shane Gostisbehere. We got to talk a little bit about a medical procedure he had. So Mark Friedman first.
I think it's a good thing. I think he played well enough to earn that. It's a contract that doesn't hurt them cap-wise. I think it was a smart move. And look, we know they have I do believe it's called a log jam at the blue line right now. But like as we've seen in the past, it never hurts to have a little bit of backup. Plus, you have all these guys in Lehigh now, and you need somewhere to bridge a gap because they're not going to be ready for at least a year or two. So I really like the deal. I liked him when he came up here, and he played very good. And he did. And what I think people forget is he was up during that rebound streak, wasn't he? He played against some tough teams, if I remember correctly, and he performed. The best thing I can say about it is this, and I think I might have even said it before on a previous show. You didn't hear his name getting called. So that's always a good thing when you're a defenseman and you just come up and you don't hear your name getting spoken a lot by the commentators. It means you're doing your job.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that he probably was sheltered. I remember seeing him make some reliable plays. He wasn't trying to do too much. This is not a guy with a great ceiling, but his floor is high enough where he slots into that 6'7" defenseman role fairly well. It helps that he's right-handed. He's a smaller guy, but he's stocky. He kind of reminds me of Chemo a little bit, so I'm not worried he's going to get bowled over that much. But as long as he plays within himself, I know it's a little cliched, he can be an asset. And with the salary cap being what it is for the next few years, that it's really important for them to have competent players who can step in, just like Haig stepped in when he wasn't playing for a while, when Ghost was out, and he kind of took Ghost's spot. And it's really you need it, and the Flyers have more in the way. In the camp that happened here, even though he's coming off a back surgery, we saw Igor Zamula. He's not eligible to play, and they wouldn't want to play him anyway because I think he has, he's still leftover remnants of the surgery he had on his back. I'm not exactly sure what kind of procedure he had, but he looks pretty good out there, and Chuck Fletcher was singing his praises. But I want to mention about Ghost. He had another knee scope. It was basically a clean out like the other one, and I think he said that it was from overcompensating for his other knee, which can happen, which means congenitally he might have had some cartilage that's going to tend to fray a little bit, and you have to get in there and just shave it out. Sometimes they can save it, but in this particular case, it sounds like that they just shaved it. I think if they try to maintain the cartilage and let it grow back, or just heal, because once it gets past a certain point, they shave it. It's preferable to keep it. You're out for a while because it takes a long time to heal. So he should be fine, but he's not. He said he's not where he would like to be. That's not a good thing for his potential trade value going into the offseason, though, huh?
Yeah, I would guess so. I guess that made the signing Friedman even more important, I guess. If he's not going to be 100% ready, at least you have somewhere to fall back on if you think you need to sit. If he could twist it and it could swell right the hell up again, and then you got to sit him for a little bit. So I think it was smart for that case, and I'm hoping. I mean, I know a couple people that have had those minor scopes going on, and I think my brother had one. And I mean, his rehabilitation was kind of short, but he's definitely not a pro hockey player, and he's definitely not a fit athlete like they are. So I'm optimistic, at least,
Well, they know what they're doing. I had a scope back in the day, but by then my ACL was gone and my career was over. And I'll write a book one day. It will be a very sad novel. But,
that means
it will have to be a novel because I'll have to build up how good I was as a street hockey player. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I thought you were talking about your pro badminton career.
No, never did that. But yeah, and AV was saying they're going to hold out to the very last minute with Ghost. And I think our buddy Jamie Basco was there, picking up a lot of the audio from the players and the AV. And he said he's stressing a systematic approach to returning and bringing the players back with the mindset that they had back last September as a frame of reference. Like we started, God, doesn't that seem like so long ago?
Yeah, it is. It's been, it's going to be close to a year. We're 2 months shy of a year.
Wow. But
since training camp.
Yeah, and the seeding games are going to be important, but the emphasis is going to be on the playoffs, and the lineups are going to reflect that. So in these seeding games, it sounds like AV is going to be trying to get some conditioning done for some players. I mean, TK didn't have a lot of skating time. Jake was saying he was lucky he did have access to ice, if I remember properly. And also we all know about Provy. Provy's been working out, and he's looking like a freaking Norris Trophy winner compared to most of his teammates because, like, he's been buff and in shape. And it's like he's been practicing nonstop since this whole thing started in March.
Yeah, we kept hearing about it. He was lucky enough to have access to that rink with the family he used to stay with. So, which I just think he's gonna be one of those players that's gonna stand out in this whole Stanley Cup run here. I think he's the one that you're gonna see get like national coverage because of the condition he's in.
Yeah, it's gonna be really great to see him, and I think he's gonna have an advantage for like about 30 days into the whole process that the Flyers can make it last that long. It's going to be fun to watch. Hey, let's talk about some of the line combos that, it's all fluid, but just to kind of get into AV's head. So I don't know what's going to happen with Farabee, if he's going to be in the lineup or not. There's some battles there. We'll get into that a little bit later. But you had Hayes centering Farabee and Konechny. And this is Group B, by the way. Grant centering Raffle and Pitlick. And then you had Thompson between Bunneman and Tworinsky. You had Sanheim with Myers, Ghost with Friedman, Zamula with Walensky, who's like the minor league guy. There's Andy, I think it is.
Yes.
And then you had Elliott and Ustimenko as part of that Group B. Now, Group A, you had Coots centering G and Jake, Lawton between JVR and Oban Kubel, and Frost between Andrioff and Rupsov. And then you had Provy with Niskanen, Haig with Braun, and Wotherspoon with Prosser. And you had Hart and Lyon in that particular group. So the one thing that pops out is some of the battles that are going to emerge. And we know Farabee's in the lineup. Frost, you have to think, he's going to be a black ace, which are the extra guys that have to remain ready, But you have to think, well, what's going to go with Lawton? Is Lawton really going to be a center, or is it going to be back on the wing where he appears to be more effective?
That's a tough call. I guess it all depends on I guess on mini camp here and then the first round of the round robin here. I just think that you have a little bit of time. You can take a chance. 2 and 3, 4 seed. You have a little bit of time to figure out what you're going to do. I think Knack kind of earned the spot the way he was playing, especially at the break. And if he can come back true to form, it's going to be a tough call. Because Lawton is better on the wing. I think you might be stuck, though, for a little bit if the other guys don't pan out. Because I don't think Morgan Frost is – I know we said it before, he wasn't ready. And then, of course, he comes out and scores, 2 goals the first 3 games and make us look like idiots. But
yeah, but then he turned into the guy we thought he was going to be,
Exactly. The defensive assignments, it was funny because when he played with Giroux, you could see Giroux picking up the center assignment on the defense on the way back. So I just don't think he's ready enough for the center spot on the defensive end, let alone, I'm not even going to talk about the offense. He could probably chip in a goal here and there because people probably forgot about him. But and then when they, of course, as it always does, because this is the National Hockey League, it catches up to you because people figure you out unless you're the real deal. And I'm not saying he's not the real deal, but I'm saying he's just not ready yet.
Well, yeah, the only thing is, though, and this is something I was got a like from our sometime adversary when it comes to prospects, Dan Silver. And I was saying, watch out for Farabee and Frost. Shep, they just had an off season in a way. You know what I mean? So
that's true.
I think guys like this, kind of light goes on, things slow down, they have this downtime. If they've been able to train, I know the skating might not be available for both of them, but I think it's very possible with this little break and their bodies recovering. These guys are so young. When they take a leap, it's so dramatic compared to the veterans. You might be surprised that Frost, and particularly Farabee, when you think of, how he just physically seemed overwhelmed at times.
Yeah.
Might have caught up with that. So we'll see, because we know Frost is not a lock to be in the lineup. Farabee pretty much is. And we know that Frost is going to be an ace along with some of these other guys that we mentioned. And the goaltending is going to be unlimited. They're going to have Ustimenko fourth, and obviously Lyon behind Elliott, and Carter Hart's going to be the main guy, of course. But very interesting. A little good article by Ryan Gilbert up at Broad Street Hockey, talking about some of the training camp battles. Maybe we'll get back into that a little bit later, but we got to get ready for DB. It should be great, though, following this action. It's great having the reports that we have so far coming from camp. It's almost surreal, after everything that's been going on. And now joining the O&B Puckcast, senior writer for TFP, and of course we know him from the Hot Stove on SiriusXM NHL. Dennis Bernstein, DB, great to have you, man.
Gentlemen, great to be with you.
Fantastic. Man, this is an epic project that the league has tried to pull off. And listening to you guys, Ryan Payton and Dave Pagnotta this past Saturday, you spoke about this return to play CBA package, and the players voted on it and got a 78% yes. Maybe you could break down some of the elements of that from your perspective.
Well, I don't think, and in talking to a couple of agents, I don't think there really was another option, to be honest with you. What was the other option? $65 million salary cap and 50% escrow for the players. Not only was this a return to play, this was a vote not only on the CBA, but the future of the game, the way we know it. I mean, there was really no other options given what's going on in the world with finances and COVID-19. It's something that had to pass. And when you also add in the consideration that TV contracts coming up after next season, like, this had to be done. And look, it wouldn't have been done if not for a lot of movement on both sides, but by the Players Association and the NHL. Because when we usually get to the end of the road with respect to a CBA, what do we talk about? Work stoppages. But everybody knows we have to go in a different direction. And I think both sides knew that probably over the last 12 to 18 months. We've had Matthew Schneider, who's the executive assistant to Don Fear on our show about a month or so ago, and he remarked that the cooperation and the transparency between the league and the PA has been unprecedented because I think they understand that not only the future of the game was at stake. Nobody saw this coming, I think, in the last 6 months. But again, there was no other option here. And hopefully once we'll get to normal, and hopefully that will be by the end of this year, once we get that back to $4.8 billion, the movement that the players needed to see with respect to extending the CBA, with respect to reducing escrow down to 6% over time, and also Olympic participation was really late in the game. Nobody's really bringing up Olympic participation. I think we broke it first about a month or so ago when that got added into the mix. It showed you that I believe that the NHL owners are happy with the structure, the financial structure of the league, and they were willing to move on a couple of points, which were obviously the escrow and the Olympics. But given the state of the world right now, I'm not sure that many players want to get on a plane and go to Beijing in 2022. So I'll reserve my thoughts about full participation by everybody in the game once we get to that time of day.
Yeah, no, I definitely can see that. That escrow concession and what you were talking about, how it reflected the confidence in the revenue projections for the reasons you outlined, was really a big part of this thing.
Yeah, well, look, I think part of it was spurred by Artemi Panarin's rant on Twitter a couple of weeks ago with respect to he doesn't want to come back with it. But it's been a sore point for the players for a long time. I know that going back to the last CBA, I'm close with Dustin Brown here in LA, and we had, when they were not playing, he was harping on, 18, 15%. So I think that was a major moving point. And look, the owners are going to make money. If we get back to $4.8 billion and then escrow starts coming down, everybody's going to make money. Like, that's a lot of money to split between both sides. And I anticipate that the viewership for the start of play or the resumption of play will be off the hook. NBC will get a little bit of a taste because they should have had the Olympics at this point in time of the year, and they're not going to have that. So I think when you look at all the other sports and their ratings with the sport, like PBR gets 800,000 people on CBS on a Sunday. I think that's going to be great. So it's a great way stepping off point to go into negotiations with an ESPN. There are some games on ESPN on the ESPN platform right now, ESPN Plus.
Right.
But will CBS get involved? Will TNT get involved? Will other other maybe Hulu or other platforms get involved. So I think they'll be in a really good position, given that I think these ratings will be off the hook, and there's a never-ending thirst for hockey. I mean, I know that when NASCAR came back, I never watched NASCAR. Did I watch that Darlington race? Yeah, start to finish. Me watching NASCAR. That doesn't really happen. So I think that everybody understood that this was not just a CBA negotiation for just extending a labor agreement. This was for the greater good of the game, the future of the game. And I think everybody understood what the stakes are. And that's why when I see that, big-time riders had some reservations. You read about, that doubt they could happen and that players are upset with the deal and so many players are going to opt out. Well, 80% of the players voted for it. Only 150 total voted against it. And now we are here after the option to opt out. We had 8 players opt out. And the player of most consequence is Mike Green. So all these negative naysayers about they doubt coming back, cancel the season, all this other stuff, they have a lot of crow to eat right now, to be honest. And I don't want to call anybody by name, but all the stuff that's happened that people said wouldn't happen has happened, right? And now we are on the cusp of returning. And when I watch the MLS play down in Orlando, Florida, of all places, I think we can get this game back on board with respect to playing in Toronto and Edmonton. So I think this is just massive work by both the PA and the NHL because, again, they understood what was at stake here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to recap for folks, what this actually means is that with the CBA expected to expire, was scheduled to expire in 22, extended to September 15th of 2026, which means we have 6 years of labor peace. Let's put it behind us. Let's look forward to maybe the Olympics, like you said. It's a little shaky there. We'll see. Yeah. And but it's great. It's great for the fans. But the one thing, Dennis, that comes to mind was, look, one thing I was thinking that fans would count on with this static cap, 81.5, 81.5, then 82.5, and then that depends on the lag you were referring to in terms of how they're going to formulate that. Are we going to see a ton of player movement after this season to try and accommodate that? And then you have the Seattle expansion factor thrown in here?
I think you'll see a ton of movement from certain teams. I don't know. Look, if you want to win a cup in Tampa Bay with your current teammates, you better do it right now. Because that team is going to look very different. Yanni Gourde can't play on the fourth line, making $5 million a year. I mean, I don't know what to do with Andre Palat or Tyler Johnson or Alex Killorn. And look, when they signed the deal for Vasilevsky to give him $9.5 million a year, they weren't expecting this, right? So they're going to have some issues with respect to that. And as a side, I don't think that you're going to see a situation where you're going to be getting goaltenders getting $10 million contracts a year. The thing in Florida hasn't really worked out. Maybe Bob rises up and plays out of his head and plays his old Vezina level, and maybe they win a championship down there because they got a lot of talent. But you look at Carey Price, Vasilevsky, and Bob as $10 million players. I don't think you can afford to do that in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think you got to manage your expectations if you're a goalie and a goalie agent, that you're not going to get that type of money. And I look at Toronto. I don't know how you're going to pay 3 players over $10 million a year and build a blue line that they need and add in the Jake Muzzin extension and think you could be in a contender. You're going to have 3 or 4 players on minimum contracts. So who do you target? A guy like Nylander. I don't see how they're going to keep that group together. So that's the negative part of it. So I think so with respect to your question about massive change, I don't think so. But I look at a team like Colorado, who were set up so sweet. I mean, they got Gabe Landeskog at less than $6 million a year for another year. They've got McKinnon at $6.3 million, which is the crime of the century right now.
Yeah.
Right? And that's with Rantanen over $9 million a year. So that team, if they don't win a cup, and maybe they do, maybe they're certainly one of the favorites, but in the area, if they're deficient, they don't win a cup, and the goaltending doesn't produce, or maybe they're a little soft on defense. I think their offense is really good. They can cherry pick off a couple of these teams, find a goaltender, find some more defensemen, and they're going to be in really good shape for the next couple of years. That's the dangerous team. You mentioned Seattle. I think is going to get a benefit from it. So that's the I think there'll be maybe a handful of teams, maybe 3 or 4 teams. Do I see massive movements? No, because everybody's in the same boat. You could actually argue that these teams won't be able to make a lot of moves right? It would have to be pure dollar for dollar trades because most of them aren't maybe at 81 million, but they might be 78, they might be at 77, and they're gonna have to make allowances for RFAs, for arbitration eligible RFAs. So I'm not sure you're going to see a lot of it. I think you'll see exiting from the teams that I mentioned and probably additions to the one team I mentioned. The other thing is that free agents, it's going to be a tough season to be an off season to be a free agent, right? I'm a strict free agent. I feel sorry for a guy like Taylor Hall. I mean, who would in this, now forget about his play, but who in this market would want to commit $63 million to a player under any circumstances? So that's going to be tough. Pietrangelo a different story. I could see Alex taking a one-year deal for about the same money to stay in St. Louis and trying again next season. But Taylor Hall has no connection to anybody. And Elliot Friedman mentioned today that maybe he's tired of losing, so maybe he takes a little bit less to go with a winner and tries to get a cup. Because I don't think he's going to get it in Arizona. If he really wants to go to free agent route, I'm not sure there's going to be that many takers at the money he wants.
Now, is he tied to Calgary? Does he have like a kind of like a Tavares kind of a level of attachment to that town? I've heard that, and I'm not sure how accurate that is.
Yeah, he might be, but I think that's not a team that's, these owners, what's happened with respect to, COVID-19 and the limit, they don't have a lot of cash laying around to drop $55, $60 million on a player. So I think that Taylor's got to look at, maybe there's a contending team that steps up and say, hey, we'll give you $7 million or $6 million for 1 year. We're not sure about the uncertainty of our finances. I think he's in a really tough spot. And I know that we had his agent on about 6 weeks ago, and they've had no discussions with Arizona. Now, at that point in time, he was negotiating a contract, but I think it's a wait-and-see situation with him. He's done okay in Arizona. He did better than he was doing in New Jersey. He wasn't scoring a lot of goals, but again, I don't know the player. Unless you think that he's absolutely the player that's going to put you over. Like, again, I'm not sure it's going to be that many comers when we get to October and his free agency for Taylor Hall.
Yeah, and when you think about his age, what is he? Is he 29 or?
He's 29. Yep.
Yeah, so he's at that age where guys like him start slowing down sometimes, especially if they're speed players who've had leg injuries or lower body injuries. You would probably want to shade toward gambling at that age on a defenseman rather than a forward. I would think.
And again, he's a winger. He's not a center.
Right.
Like if he was a center, would Montreal line up to get him? Yeah, because they don't have a number one center. But look, he was a dominant player in New Jersey. They wouldn't have made the playoffs. He wouldn't have won the MVP with his performance. But he's not a generational player. He's part of he's a foundational player, right? You need players around him. He's not going to lead any team to championship. He's not Patrick Kane, right? He's a really good player. Like, I like him. He's fast. He can score goals. He's dynamic. But he's not that player that's going to lead a team to a championship. You have to have a solid team to add him to the mix to win a championship. He's not going to. It's not the NBA, right? It's not a situation where you add one player and you become a contender. You need a group of players around him that. And maybe it's Colorado. Maybe that might be an issue as well. I mean, maybe he's the missing link with respect to that. But again, I think it's going to be a light market for Taylor Hall. I don't think the team's going to be lining up left and right to commit to that much money in these uncertain times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm really focused on Toronto, like you were saying earlier. Something's got to give there. They really need a defenseman. And they have a window with most of their players, but I think they want to strike within the next 2-3 years with Tavares and Matthews. I mean, that's going to be a really compelling situation.
Yeah, well, they got the coach right. I think that Keefe is the right coach there. It's just that and I'm really interested to see how this team plays this playoff, right? Because what was the rap on Toronto? Well, they always played Boston. It was never good as Boston. Never going to get by Boston. Well, now they're not playing Boston, but they are playing a team that stylistically is the worst possible team to play. They're playing a defensive-minded, grinding team in Columbus. I want to see how that works, because if they don't beat Columbus, somebody's got to be answering for all the, for the lack of playoff success. Is it Kyle Dubas? Is it Brendan Shanahan? Because on paper they should beat Columbus, right? But look at what Columbus did last season. They beat a way better team, and now Columbus is basically, except for Josh Anderson, they're healthy right now. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens with respect to Toronto. They really, you think there's less pressure on them because they're not playing Boston? I think there's more pressure because if they don't beat Columbus, then you really got to change the team. Then whatever mix of players you have is not, and you can't beat Columbus, who's really not really an offensive gifted team. So, and I get it. It's a 5-game series. It's a little different circumstance. You haven't played for 4 months, but you got to get some player success given all this money to these players here. And if not, I think you really got to look at how you've structured the team.
Yeah, I think you've lined that up perfectly, Bo. Columbus is not a team I would want to play if I were Toronto. No. They're a grind team. They have the right mentality to pull an upset like they did last year. And, some of those guys are gone, but still, they're going to be a tough out either way. Yeah. So, Chef?
Yeah, I want to go back to the deal a little bit because I know you had touched on it. Like you said, you were watching NASCAR because it was pretty much the only game in town. And but how important was it for the NHL to prove to everybody else that they were one of the big four? They often get chided as being the minor league kind of business, but they came back here. They seemed the only group that have their plan in place, and they perform it. They're coming back. How important was it to prove to everybody else that they were a major league?
Not only have the plan in place, but have really no players speaking out, other than maybe Phil Deneau, who said, I don't want to be away from my family for 3 or 4 months. Well, guess what? You're away for maybe 3-4 weeks, and then, or probably 5 to 6 weeks, and then your friends could visit during the conference finals. That's only 4 teams left. So I think that the fact that the rank and file and no big players have stepped up and said, I don't want to play. I mean, Carey Price had some reservations, and you saw him saying goodbye to his kids. But I think that was important, number one. Number two, it wasn't that to show that the NHL was still a sport of consequence, despite what Max Kellerman said 2 months ago. I think it's more important because had they not played, right? Let's say NHL decided to cancel a season, and MLB plays, and MLS plays, and NASCAR comes back, NBA plays, and then we got football, and there's no NHL till December. You can forget about the NHL people watching in the States. That's all. Maybe in Philly, maybe in Buffalo. It would be an afterthought. It would be a minor league sport at that point in time. It would go behind the MLS. Well, some people debate that. It was vital that they come back. And again, I think that the players, to their credit, understood what was at stake. Because all that anonymous BS that you heard from reports about they're not happy, not coming back, they may not vote for it, they voted in overwhelming numbers. And nobody's opted out. None of the big stars have opted out, right? And so they understood. So I think people understood the fact that everybody was on the same page, as you mentioned. And because, again, as I reiterate, I think they understood that the future of the sport was at hand. It wasn't just the season. It wasn't just the CBA. It wasn't just contending for the Stanley Cup. Everything was connected, and I think that's why you saw. And that's why I think people really weren't keeping their eye on the puck, so to speak, with respect to the vote. It was just not a vote return to play. It was a vote to return to play and extend the CBA for the lifeblood of this sport, right? And if you looked at the numbers, probably 200 or so players didn't even vote. They didn't even think, because if you add that number, I think it was 600, and I think they have about 800 members. So 200 guys didn't even think it was that important to even vote. So, but yeah, this was vital because, again, if there was no NHL on the landscape in the States, and it's always going to be popular in Canada, you could forget about this as a major sport. It would people would just forget about it, to be honest with you, because you couldn't go 9 months between games. It couldn't happen. It's just the health of the sport would be severely damaged and would take probably years and years to get back to the level where it was when we stopped playing March.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, DB, I know it wasn't practical, and you talked about this earlier, but if you separated out the return to play portion versus the CBA extension, I wonder if the voting would have been very similar in that 75%, 78%, 80% range for each of them. I'm thinking that the return to play probably would have been a lot closer, and the CBA would probably be pretty much what it was. What do you think?
Well, if your theory is correct, why did only 8 people opt out? And some of them were Zach Trotman and Stephen Kampfer and guys who don't even really are factors into the league. Give me the star play, because there's no consequence to opt out.
I think the biggest, I think the biggest name is probably Travis Hamonic. That's about it. And they have a health problem with his kids or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So and so no, because there was no consequence to opting out. You could have opted out, and certainly nobody would say anything. Now, I do think that the hockey mentality had something to do with it, because if you have a room of 23 guys who are trying to go for a Stanley Cup and are sacrificing and will be away from their home and families, and you don't, like, you got to walk back in the locker room next fall and face these guys. And I think that there would be an issue. I mean, I know these players. I know there's a team commitment, but if it was just a return to play, I think with no penalty, players would have opted out. And I think that it's maybe overblown with respect to, because I look at it this way. I think that players understand that the median age of players are 27 years old. Right? They have very strong immune systems, and they're not susceptible, other than a guy like Chris Letang, who had a stroke, other than Max Domi, who I don't believe will be playing, right? Anton Strawman, who has some respiratory issues with his lungs, right? I mean, those players, and Capo Caco. But none of these guys have opted out. I mean, Chris Letang, if he opted out, nobody would say a word, but he's ready to go. And you also look at the comments by the players. They're jazzed up. They're ready to go. I think they understand that with all the negativity around this season, the way it's reported, and look, I understand the loss of life. I understand the number of cases. I'm in Los Angeles. There are a high number of cases. But the likelihood of these players contracting this, like if they're smart and stay home, it's not going to happen. I don't expect to see an outbreak. Could there be one or two more positive cases reported? Probably. Once they get to the bubbles, will they? No, because there's going to be securing the hotels. These guys who want, and you got to understand something. Is it really that important to go out to a bar? Like, with everything that's at stake right now,
right?
Like, you want to go out. You want to, when you get to Toronto, Edmonton, you want to go out. You want to slip by security, go out to a bar, come home, and then possibly risk the entire team's livelihood. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be blackmarked like that. So I just think that, the media, and we're all part of the media, we have a tendency to be really negative. And in this sport, we had people who were saying that we shouldn't play, and they doubted we were ever going to play. And now we're at a point where we are going to play. The schedule announced. I think the players looked past that and said, okay, what are the odds of me contracting this and getting sick? Because they have players that contract it. Look, Austin Matthews, like it or not, is a little bit of a role model. He got it. He was asymptomatic for the most part, and now he's playing, and he's not fearful of playing. So he's not going to say that publicly, but that's where we stand right now. So I think the players understood that what the risks are involved. And look, here's the bottom line. I've said this for the last couple of weeks. This is all a practice in risk management. How much risk are you willing to take as a player, as a league, as a team, as an individual who might cover it? Like, how much risk are you willing to take? How much risk do you believe you'll be at? And I believe these players, other than the 8 that we mentioned, and don't think they're at much risk. And I believe, because look, when they brought out the protocol 6 weeks ago, it's a 29-page protocol, the first one. I said, okay, well, they're not guessing here. This is not being done by the seat of your pants. Not only that, if you're a player, you have to believe that Don Fehr and the PA are going to be, their first task is to consider your health and safety. And I believe that's what the players believe, and that's why we didn't see mass number of defections. And which, to be honest with you, I expected it, because if a player was going to opt out, like, they would have went on the record and said, look, I'm not playing, regardless if this practice or not. I'm not playing. And I never saw that. I never saw this. Right. These hints of all this, negativity. I never saw it, because I'm a positive person, and I believe from March 15th on that we were going to play. We were going to find a way to play and have a strategy to play safely and without harm to the players. And I believe when we get to August 1st, we'll have that as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've quoted stats from some epidemiologists that the players in their age category are twice as likely to be fatal accident in Pennsylvania, that twice as likely than they are to perish from this virus, God forbid. So it is, like you said, it's risk management. Just a couple more from me, DB. There have been some elusive targets for some teams that have finally signed. Kirill Kaprizov for the Wild and Ilya Sorokin for the Islanders. I think these are big gets for both of these teams, a real shot in the arm.
Yeah, the white whale is coming home to the island from a year. Was he? Like 5 or 6 years ago? Next season, it'll be great. Look, they're going to sign. They signed their entry-level deals. They burned the deal, and they're going to have it next year. So yeah, I think this is great for the league. I think it's important, and they will be two impact players, right? For franchises that, well, look, Minnesota definitely needs an impact offensive player, so that's a great signing for them. And the Islanders, yeah, in their system, the guy's set up to win. A goaltender set up to win the Barry Trotz system. So I think it's a great get for both teams. It'll make them look. The Islanders, they got Pajot. Barzal's going to probably stay there, and there's going to be no offer sheets. I can't imagine the offer sheets in this day and age. So they're going to be contenders for a while. So two really good gets for both these teams, and we'll see them to play next year. And I think the other great thing is that they are allowed to participate. So from with respect to the players right now, with the teams right now, so from a development standpoint, these are two guys coming over from Russia, and the KHL is, it's probably level of play between the NHL and the AHL. But they get indoctrinated to the game in North America. They get to play with their future teammates or practice with the future teammates. I think that's a big win for both, that they can come over and participate in Stanley Cup playoff. That's just the surroundings of it and what it's like to be around a team when they're in the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple more. Lindy Ruff gets hired by the Devils, who retained Tom Fitzgerald as their GM. Any truth to the rumor that Peter Laviolette had a real good shot at that gig, but maybe priced himself out of the market for that?
And that's the convention, and I would agree with it. And I'm not sure, again, that when you're a coach trying to negotiate a better deal money-wise in this COVID era, that you're going to get it. So yeah, and I know, there's people out there saying that, look, there's only a retrade, 35 or 40, people can only be coaching in the NHL, and yeah, I get it. But, Ruff had coached a long time in Buffalo, also coached in Dallas, went back behind the bench and worked with David Quinn, even though I know people have criticized Ruff, saying that the Rangers aren't any good defensively, and he was responsible for that. The retread stuff I just don't get, because the last time I checked, Berube, retread, won a cup. AV and Tortorella are probably the Jack Adams nominees, right? They're all retreads, so don't tell me that. I mean, you want proven, and they have given guys who've been proven. Look, Jim Montgomery got a shot in Dallas. Unfortunately, he went by the wayside. Bill Peters got a shot in Carolina and Calgary. Didn't work out, right? So you get opportunities here. But look, I understand. And John Hines was the guy in New Jersey. He's now in Nashville. So I get it. I understand it. Look, I think you need a veteran presence here, right? So it was going to be a veteran guy, because they tried Hines, and I loved Hines, and I love Shiro. I thought that was a great combination, and now we've got Tom Fitzgerald and Lindy Ruff, 18 months later. So that's the issue. That's the challenge, is that there's so much pressure to win. And look, it's also great expectations, right? Because coming in, they got Jack Hughes, they got PK, they got they're going to be really, really good. They already have Nico Hischier, and they were terrible. They were a really bad team. Now, there's a lot of building to do for Tommy Fitzgerald. That defense has got to go a long way. And you know something? PK better earn his $9 million at some point, because his season last year was disastrous. He should be embarrassed by that performance. He's playing like for a player maybe a third of his salary. He really has to raise his level. So I understand why they hired Lindy Ruff. Will it work out? I don't know. I'm not sure. But and you do get second chances. Look at Ralph Kruger. He made friends with Jack Eichel, and he gets to keep his job in Buffalo, and he's the only one. So I get it, I understand it, but we'll see. I don't know. Tommy Fitzgerald has a lot of work to do, a lot of heavy lifting to do to get a contending team together, because while there's some talent there, there's a lot of holes in that depth chart he needs to fill.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think he's got a keeper in Mackenzie Blackwood, but other than that, there are a couple of those kids up front, and like you said, a lot of filling in. Chef?
Yeah, I just want to go back one more thing about that CBA. It included the Olympics, and I know you said about going to Beijing and then Italy, maybe not so much now, but was that? I mean, I was a big fan of when the NHL guys played in the Olympics. I was a big fan of it. I was just wondering, was that from the owner's push, or was that a player push thing to do?
No, I did a story on the NHL when they did a couple of years ago with the All-Star game. Every single player wants to play in the Olympics, with no exception. They want to play for their country. They like the experience of going over, competing for a gold medal. So that's definitely was from the player side that they wanted that in the deal. The owners did because it was on their dime. Like, they don't really get that much benefit from it, and they had to pick up all the travel expenses and the lodging expenses, and now the IIHF and the IOC, they're going to pick up those expenses. And that was Gary's point all the way. Gary said, look, we're paying for this. We don't really see the true benefit. It disrupts the season, which you can argue all you want. It does disrupt the season, right? You're going to have 3 weeks without NHL games. It's going to be a truncated, it's going to be a condensed schedule. It does affect the play in the NHL. So I get it. And there's always people that are going to criticize Bettman no matter what he does, even though he's done a tremendous job here in the last 6 months, right? But it was definitely from the player side that they wanted to do this. And again, it's because the owners wanted labor peace and wanted extension and like the framework of how the salary cap works. They gave in on that point, which is a good negotiation. But yeah, it was definitely a player-driven request.
Yeah. Final one from me, DB. What do you think about the Philadelphia Flyers, their chances, how they're situated, and what do you expect from them?
You're going to the final, right?
Always.
Look,
always is right.
Here's the thing, right? This team is ahead of schedule, right? They got robbed at the end. They were 9-1, as you guys know, when we stopped play. They were on the heels of Washington. They passed Pittsburgh. I really like this team. I think on one of the maybe it was our podcast, on Kings of the Podcast, I think I picked them to go to the Cup final. I did. I just love it. They're ahead of schedule, and they're playing with house money, right? Because look at the group of 4 they're in, right? Boston, they took off. They created space between themselves and Tampa, and they were clearly the best team when we paused, right? Tampa, a lot of pressure on Tampa to get there, right? Washington, older team. You know, probably Hope's last season in Washington, but definitely an older team. The Flyers, they found the goalie. The retread coach, who people doubted, has done an incredible job. If he wins the Jack Adams, nobody's going to say it. I just think this team is so set up to win, and there's just no pressure on them. So if they do fail and they go out in the second round, let's say, like the people saying, all right, this is a team that really is a team of the future. They've got all the parts there. They've got youngsters coming. Right, Provorov is a monster now. He's going to win the league in the future. Like, I just really like the way that Chuck Fletcher has. You know, he made the right call on the coach, and he's made some moves that have been opportunistic. You know, what happens with Ghost? Who knows? I mean, you heard the comments from AV about the possibility of his playing. I just really like the way they set up. I don't think there's any pressure on there. They're maybe pound for pound, they're not as good as Boston. Could they beat Boston in the 7-game series? Absolutely, they can. Like, if Carter Hart plays at the level he can, then they can do that. So I just really like the way they're playing. So if you're a Flyer fan, if you don't win the Cup this year and half facetious about it, like, they're set up to go forward and be really good for the next 2 or 3. See, that window is wide open for this team. And I just think the lack of pressure on them, because nobody's really – what are you talking about? Colorado, Vegas, St. Louis, Boston, Tampa. They're not in the front minds of people when people are picking them to win the Cup. So I think there's no pressure on them, but they have all the components. They're deep up front. I like the way the defense is solidified. The youngsters have come through, and they solved the goalie issue. So where's the deficiency? Now they have to go out and execute. And again, all the teams are starting from a standing start. Could they go out in the first round, through an upset? Of course they can. What's going to happen in the seeding round? But I just think in the big picture, if you're a Fly fan, the future's really bright. If they don't make it this season, I got to think in the next 2 or 3 seasons, they can be the favorite to come out of the East.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're hopeful. Look, I think a lot of us feel like, look, win around this year. First round they would have won since 2012, and that represents progress. Yeah. And go from there.
Absolutely.
Like you said, the window. DB, I have to thank you so much for doing this and taking the time. Where can people follow you, and what kind of contact information you want to share with the people?
Sure. Well, if you can't find me, then you're really not tuned into hockey at all. But just kidding. So, okay, so from the top, thefourthperiod.com. Your guys' podcast is linked there as well. Dennis TFP is probably like the kind of the central focus of where you can find all my stuff. We do a podcast, Kings of the Podcast. It's LA-centric. We just had Rob Blake on. Really, really well-received 40-minute interview with Rob Blake. And Excellent. Then on SiriusXM, I'm now on like every Wednesday from 5 to 6 Eastern with Steve Kalias and Mick Kern, we do a roundtable every Wednesday. And then our show, The Hot Stove, from 11 to 1 Eastern every Saturday, gets replayed during the day on every Saturday. And it's also available on podcast. So I'm keeping busy. And the plan is for me to hopefully get on a plane on Friday and go up to Edmonton and try to cover at least the qualifying round of the Western Conference.
Wow.
Awesome.
Wow. Congrats on
Let me in
that.
the country. I'm not sure about that, but we'll see.
Well, good luck. Thanks again, man.
No problem, boys. Thanks for the time. It was great being on the O&B podcast.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Cheers.
Okay, so Chef, another great appearance by Dennis Bernstein. We call him DB. Chock full of information there. So, your thoughts?
I like the fact that, maybe we weren't looking at the Flyers with rose-colored glasses or homers, as it's called. Somebody from the outside looking in actually sees this team as a well-put-together team, a well-built team, and that they actually have a good, solid chance. And he made a good point. If they win one round, you said it too. They win one round, 2 rounds, it's progress. It's awesome. We haven't had that in a long time, 8 years almost. So the pressure isn't really on them, and who knows? Maybe this team is doesn't know that they're not supposed to win, that it's not their time or whatever. Maybe it is. So it could be fun and interesting. I think that's what I took out of that from DB.
Yeah. I think that Boston is an older team that really has to win now. Tampa's feeling the pressure and the financial, situation that they're in. They really got to get it done now. And Toronto has their pressure with all the big rebuild and all the pain they went through, and then they had, had to get rid of the big name coach Babcock and bring in Keefe and see what happens there. So yeah, I think the Flyers are under much less pressure than the others. 2 items before we leave and call it a night. The Flyers had their annual awards, and we covered some of them last show. Just wanted to finish up. We left off with the Pelle Lindbergh Award for the most improved player, and it just happened to be the guy that won the award for the class guy, Scott Lawton. So he's voted the most improved player in addition to that. So your thoughts with Lawton standing out like that? That caught me a little bit surprised. I thought it would be Konechny on that one.
Well, yeah, it could have been Konechny, but I think it was still a good call. I mean, if you looked at this, he was on the cusp 2 years ago of not being on his team anymore, 2-3 years ago, and now all of a sudden he looked down that lineup and he's somebody who did improve vastly, and I think being with this coach with Vigneault, I think it was huge for him. I think he was used in the right way, and I think that he has a really good future the rest of the season, the rest of his contract too.
Yeah, I agree. Lawton was not a bad choice at all. No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I favored Konechny in that way, but Konechny had so much talent, and I think Lawton has basically stapled himself into the lineup, whereas before, if he was out, it wasn't really that much of a loss. So I probably answered my own question there.
Yeah.
Then we had the Barry Ashby Award. That had to be Provorov. I think Dan was saying it could have been Niskanen. I think they gave it to the right guy in Provy.
Mm-hmm.
And also the Bobby Clark Award for the Flyers MVP. Outside of Carter Hart, it was a little uneven until later in the season. I think Sean Couturier definitely earned that one as well, and I think that's the second one, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
One last year, back to back, right?
Yeah.
One last year too. Yeah.
I gotta tell you, this lag in time. It's like I'm a little bit of out of hockey shape too with some of these details about awards. And then the final item, I mentioned Nolan Patrick was not in the group of forwards. He will wait until next year. He says that he's feeling better than he has in the last 12 months. So that's good. It should be a very intriguing situation about what they do with him. I forget who had an article up on that. I don't know if that was on Flyers Nitty Gritty or one of the other outlets. They'll be looking at what happens with him. Any Any just thoughts about Nolan saying, "Hey, I'm not going to make it now, but I'm doing better than I have been"?
Well, it made sense though, didn't it? I mean, you're not going to activate somebody and throw them into the mix that hasn't even played in how many months? Almost 18 months now.
Yeah,
Exactly. Is it that long? Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to just throw him right in there and say, "Hey, guess what? Guess who's going to do this playoff run with us?" No, it's not feasible. He's not even close to. He might be physically fit, but game fit's a different thing. You get your legs and your speed back and your timing. So I think it's smart. It was smart. It was logical, and it doesn't say anything bad about him at this point, not at all. It just goes to show that there's the saying there's always next year, and there's going to be next year for him, and that's what he should focus on. That should be his goal, his milestone to hit.
Yeah. And besides, yeah, I think it was more like 13 months, but I mean, same difference. It has been so long, and to throw him into a playoff type atmosphere would be ridiculous. And the other thing is, next year's not that long. If everything goes to plan, that's December 1st. So it's not a big deal. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting offseason, but we got too much to cover for you coming up. But so we're going to call it a night with that, and we're going to be back next week because, like we promised before this whole thing went aground in March, things are really tightening up with the action. The games are going to start. They're going to have the first exhibition game, like we talked about earlier, somewhere between the 28th and the 30th. And that's not too far away. It's going to be here before we know it. So with that, I just wanted to let you know that we're going to have a major announcement coming up on Thursday. Look for that, okay, at O&B Puck. You can follow us at O&B Puck. So definitely check that out. Also, because he's not here, follow Dan the Flyer Fan, at Dan the Flyer Fan on Twitter, and of course at Brotherly Puck and at Brotherly Pod. And you can follow me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520, Isaiah _520. I tweet about some medical stuff with the virus and other things. Yeah, so that's you want to yell at me. And Chef, what you got for the people?
Yeah, you can find me at Chef the Left B on Twitter. You can find me at Chef at Steam Pub on Facebook. And you can find me at Steam Pub in Southampton.
Fantastic. And, of course, the O&B Puckcast, we mentioned the account earlier. If you could subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star rating on your platform of choice. We have a YouTube channel. Obviously, we're on Apple, Google, SoundCloud for now. I don't know how long for SoundCloud, but for now. And we have Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Stitcher. Yeah, there's so many places to find the O&B Puckcast. But that's it for tonight. And until next week, everybody, take care.